Welcome to meeting number 50, our gold anniversary meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, aka the Mighty Ogo, or as I call it, the only committee that matters. Now, pursuant to motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, January 18th, 2022, the committee is meeting on the study of the federal government consulting contracts awarded to McKinsey & Co. We have us welcome back our Minister of PSPC. Give the table to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to all the committee members. Thank you for inviting me today as you conduct this important study. And let me begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. With me today is my Deputy Minister, Paul Thompson, and the Assistant Deputy Minister of Procurement, Molly Royts. I'd like to begin by saying that I believe the growth in the use of consultants in the public service is an important question, and that's why the Prime Minister has asked Minister Fortier and me to review the government's practices. I also believe that these important questions can and should be asked and answered with the thoughtfulness and respect that Canadians deserve. Pendant que le comité entreprend son étude,
As this committee undertakes its work, my colleague, Treasury Board President Mona Fortier, and I are also undertaking a full review of all Government of Canada contracts with McKinsey & Company.
Treasury Board Secretariat will require federal departments to review their contracts with McKinsey through their internal audit teams to assess if contracts complied with Treasury Board policies and departmental internal control frameworks. On the PSPC side, my officials have already begun a preliminary assessment of the 24 contracts which fall under our department as the central purchaser. These contracts will also be more formally reviewed by the departmental internal audit team. In addition, to ensure there's also a more independent review, I have written to the Procurement Ombudsman to ask him to review the procurement processes associated with the award of contracts to McKinsey & Company by all federal departments and agencies. I know this committee has also adopted a motion that calls on the Auditor General to conduct a performance and value for audit. While we have found no indication to date that any rules or policies were broken, I also know that there's always room for improvement. I welcome these reviews, which may help determine what further adjustments or refinements should be undertaken to continue to strengthen the fairness, openness, and transparency of federal procurement practices. Of the 24 contracts awarded to McKinsey by PSPC since 2011, 3 of them, worth more than 50% of the total value, were awarded through open, fair, and transparent competition. À l'exception d'un
With the exception of one low dollar value contract, the remainder were awarded as call-ups through what is called the National Master Standing Offer. I recognize that there might be some confusion related to the terms standing offer and to supply arrangements, which I would like to clear up.
Arrangements are not contracts and do not guarantee a company future business with the government. They are administrative tools that streamline procurement for departments and agencies and reduce red tape and costs for governments and businesses. A company's status on a standing offer or supply arrangement list is reviewed regularly and can be revoked at any time if it no longer qualifies. In addition, standing offers have expiry dates, as these are instruments where goods or services are provided at pre-established prices. Les arrangements en matière
Supply arrangements, on the other hand, do not have expiry dates. In fact, supply arrangements are established to allow for regular refreshing of qualified suppliers and to allow competition among pre-qualified suppliers for each contract. For administrative and technological reasons, an arbitrary end date into the future is used when reporting supply arrangements on our website.
multi-year contracts with McKinsey. That said, I have asked my officials to address the way in which these standing offers are reported to avoid future confusion. I look forward to working with you, and I'm pleased to answer your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Appreciate your brevity in the opening statement. We'll start with Mrs. Cusi for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here today. You mentioned what the Prime Minister asked you and your colleague, Minister Fortier, to do. On what day did he ask you to investigate, please? What date?
I would have to consult my schedule. I'm
Okay.
not exactly clear which day. I think it was about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, all right. Perhaps if you could come back to the committee with a specific date, that would be great. What is the total number in dollars that Public Services and Procurement Canada has contracted to McKinsey and Company since November 4th, 2015? What's that number, please?
Yes, I will turn to my Deputy Minister who has all the charts in front of him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The total number of contracts is 24, and the value of those contracts is $104.6 million. And just to clarify, those are the contracts that were administered by PSPC, not by other departments and agencies.
Okay, and that's since November 4th, 2015.
That is correct.
Thank you. A January 16th, 2023 Globe and Mail article by Bill Curry says the federal government awarded 23 contracts to McKinsey and Company since 2015 with a total of $101.4 million. This was much higher than the $66.1 million that was disclosed to date through the Public Accounts of Canada. Why is the value that Public Services and Procurements Canada differ from what has been disclosed in the public accounts?
Again to the Deputy.
That question. So the public accounts would be reporting on contracts on an expenditure basis, not on the basis of establishing contracts. So those are two different ways in which this kind of activity would be tracked. And again, there's a difference between the contracts that would be ministered by PSBC as the central contracting authority versus ones that would be managed individually by other departments and disclosed as well by those departments if those contracts are over $10,000 in value.
How much in contracts has been awarded to McKinsey and Company for the 2022-2023 fiscal year, please?
That number I don't have at my fingertips. I will turn to my colleague. We could provide that even before the end of the meeting,
sure.
I'm sure.
I'll move on then. Thank you. So as we've seen, the value in contracts awarded to McKinsey and Company, this number keeps climbing. We were first told a number in the 60s, then it became 50-fold, then beyond the 50-fold. So how, Minister, can you be sure that this is the true number when you're essentially investigating yourself? How do you have such confidence in this?
Well, clearly I rely on our public officials to compile the correct numbers, and as I understand it, because there are many other departments that request consulting services through us, this is a fairly complex matter. But perhaps our Associate Deputy Minister could clarify further some of the difficulties in terms of compiling this information.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. And as was indicated, what we have been providing is in relation to the contracts awarded by PSPC, and these are reflective of the point in time in our systems. So you made reference earlier in the question to a $101 million and the fact that we had that number increase. That was reflective of a recently awarded contract that had been updated in the system after the particular media release. So we have provided now the full information of contracts that have been awarded to date, and those are based on full contract value, as well as it could be many ongoing contracts, multi-year contracts, and that would be another reason why what you might see in the public accounts in terms of actual expenditures against the contract might be different.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Royds. And is the position of Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, would it be that position that signs and approves the contracts with McKinsey, please?
Thank you for the question,
Position that signs and approves the contracts, your position?
So the positions that would sign and approve contracts would be done based on a combination of value, complexity, and risk. We have delegated authorities that are specific to certain levels of risk, complexity, and value.
Okay. And who was in the position of Associate Assistant Deputy Minister Procurement Branch when the contracts were signed with McKinsey? Were you in that position? Yes or no? Who was in the position when the
So,
contracts were signed, please?
If the question is about who is the delegated authority, as Ms. Roy.
No, I'm asking who is the person who was in Ms. Royd's position when the contracts were signed, please?
I would have to check the records. That's before my time in the position. But as I say, there'd be
Okay,
different
would it be the
delegations.
current Associate Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada? Would Ms. Reza, would she possibly have been the individual who signed those contracts?
I don't have that in front of me as to which delegated authority would have been used. It could have been that position or a different position. Again, we'd have to check the records
Okay,
on it.
I mean, clearly, my understanding is the individual in Ms. Royd's position historically signs these contracts, and that prior to Ms. Royd's being in this position, it was Ms. Retza, who of course is now in another position. Perhaps I'll conclude my time, Minister, in asking when will you provide findings to the committee as to your study?
Certainly at the earliest possible moment. As I want to emphasize, we're just as anxious as I think members of this committee are to look at what has been occurring within the department, and if there's room for improvement, get those recommendations in front of this committee as soon as we can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Kusi asks several questions that you promised to get back to us. Our clerk will follow up. I imagine that'll be the same for the rest of the afternoon. Thanks very much. Mr. Jouari, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Minister. Well, welcome to our committee, and I just want to quickly acknowledge that you're one of the very first minister who voluntarily offered the date of last week to join us, but we had some conflict around the availability of the witness on that day, so just want to quickly acknowledge and thank you on that. Minister, when you had that conversation with the Prime Minister, and you said you're going to get back to us on that day, and Minister Fortier, what was the ask? And what was the scope of the work that Minister Fortier's department was going to do, or ministry was going to do, and what's the scope of work that your department is going to do?
Thank you, and I think that is an important question. The Treasury Board Secretariat essentially puts forward the policies under which the government decides the usage of professional consulting services. In other words, they determine what kind of issues should be where should we use consulting services to address what type of policy issues. PSPC is much more focused essentially on the mechanics, how we award contracts, the type of due diligence that is done, the processes that are used. You've heard references to national standing offers, you've heard supply arrangements. These are all complex ways to keep the government going. In other words, there are a number of consultants that are used on an ongoing basis by PSPC under certain structures. And we want to ensure, and certainly this committee, I'm sure, is interested in the fact that we are actually adhering to those processes that have been established, and that, in fact, there is no interference at any level in the qualification of candidates, pre-qualification, and all the various standing offers that we have are done in accordance with the processes that have been established. And, of course, we're going to look at those processes, especially through the procurement ombudsman, to see is there anything possibly missing, is there anything that can be improved.
So thank you. Would it be fair for me to say that TBS actually develops the policy and the guidelines, and then those policies and guidelines pass to various departments? As it passed to PSPC, you look at whether the contract that's being requested to be issued, did it follow those steps? Did it fit the requirement? So in a sense of the 24 contract that we are talking about, how many of those 24 PSPC was actually the agent of the contract rather than the administrator of the contract?
I'll turn to the deputy for that detail. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Just to clarify, if you are asking how many contracts was PSPC the actual client department and user of the services, that was one of the 2024, one of the competitive contracts plus there was a small non-competitive contract worth less than $25,000.
Okay, so
there-
one contract, can you tell me what was the value of that one contract that PSPC was actually, was I called the agent of the contract?
So thank you for that question. The one contract that the larger one that I mentioned was $29.6 million, and it was for services to support our pay center operations.
Okay, great. So are you in a position to talk about the scope of that? Because naturally, your department would be the one who defined the scope as well as the criteria.
Again, it was, I believe, very much in terms of the training, the onboarding of personnel to ensure that our pay center, the Phoenix system, as we obviously call it, was being accelerated. In fact, it was called the Accelerator Project. So I'll turn to the deputy for more detail.
Yes, thank you, Minister. So the project was really looking at the human resource side of the pay center, looking at how we train our staff, how we onboard them onto the team, how we deploy the staff, how we look at the work in different levels of complexity and assign staff to those different types of works, and it led to a significant improvement in the productivity of the pay
That
center.
project was going, was it a new project that was introduced, or was it a project that the government has been engaging for?
That was a new project introduced, and it's completing almost as we speak. That contract expires at the end of March, and all the recommendations that came out of that analysis have been implemented.
Thank you. Naturally, someone within the department or minister had the authorization to sign that contract, which is fine. The other 23 contracts, since you are not the agent of the contractor, any minister to you, did you have any direct interaction with McKinsey, or any of your members of your staff had any, or department had any direct contact with McKinsey to advocate for the project or sign these projects, or?
Mr. Johari, absolutely not. The minister's office is not involved in any way in awarding these contracts.
Okay, was there any discussion around those contracts, aside from, as you call it, administration and evaluation?
Certainly not with me. Obviously, I'm fairly new to this post, but the way that the process exists, there would be no contact with the minister's office or with the minister's political staff.
Okay, anyone in the department, Mr. Thompson?
So, as Ms. Royds indicated earlier, there are different levels of delegation for the approval. So, depending on the value, it'll be done by different levels of officials. Some of them would be done at the ministerial level, and some have to go to Treasury Board for approval. So, there are different levels of authority.
Someone preempted me in thanking you for your time, Mr. Johari. Mrs. Vinola for 6 minutes, please.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. My apologies.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour, Madame.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Ms. Jazik, Mr. Thompson, Ms. Royd. I'd like to continue along the same lines as my previous colleague. Over the course of the last 12 members, one of your staff, yourself, have you had any meetings in person or by telephone with any member of McKinsey?
OK. Donc,
Excuse me, Mr. Thompson has something to say.
Peut-être juste ajouter, parce que
Well, only to add that McKinsey is a departmental supplier of services, and I work regularly with the team that is under contract for the pay administration project. So we do have a working, functional relationship. Those individuals of the McKinsey team, do you have any email which might be related directly to McKinsey, the employer, or were you using email communications directly with the team? All of the relationship are in the context of the contract and defined by the contract. So it's all spelt out in the contract, so it's structured on those lines. So in that contract, is it specified that the individuals who will be working for the Government of Canada on behalf of McKinsey, the contact an address which is parle.gc.ca or some other address. As far as I know, the email correspondence, Parle GCCA are for federal staff, and external have their own responsibility. So there is a possibility, according to you, perhaps, that you might confuse a staffer with a consultant. I don't have any example or a situation like that, no. Thank you. To your knowledge, over the course of the past 12 months, are they registered as a lobbying firm, McKinsey?
Media that I've been reading, that apparently McKinsey has not registered as a lobbyist.
OK. Donc,
Thank you. So they're not registered with, as a lobbyist, so they can request no meetings, but a minister can call McKinsey to a meeting, and they will respond, of course, if it comes from a minister's office.
Circumstance like that, as you described, right?
OK. Merci.
Thank you. The data that we have, 2022-23, that McKinsey had exclusive rights of 4 RFPs that were provided non-competitively. Of course, the rules of the game allow that to exclusive supply. Why does McKinsey have any exclusive rights on certain RFPs?
The standing offer piece and the supply arrangement piece, Mr. Deputy.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So, as the Minister noted in her remarks, we have a national master...
Question.
That wasn't quite my question. Why would McKinsey have exclusive rights to certain projects and bids? I don't really need to be explained standing offers, arrangements, or others. Why exclusivity? Well, it's a national master standing offer.
And we have 4 similar arrangements with other companies. And these arrangements contain proprietary information. Each one of these companies has a service that involves proprietary methods, tools, analytical models, and they're used to compare an organization within the Government of Canada to a peer organization, comparable organization in the private sector or in another country or order of government. So that's the nature of the work. And the reason is it's sole source is in relation to these proprietary models and data sets that these companies own.
OK. Donc, si je comprends bien.
So if I understand, they have exclusive rights because they have sold to Canada certain methodology, tools, which federal staff, employees, had perhaps no capacity to implement these tools themselves. Precisely. These tools are, well, they do surveys, proprietary data, and they are the owners of these data sets.
To do the analysis of comparisons between government operations and other entities.
Il y a personne.
And no one, absolutely no one within the government structure, our HR, would be in a position to conduct these evaluations or surveys or programming or do the analytics for their very own government. We don't have this capacity or expertise in-house.
Brief answer, please.
So in this case, it's partly about the expertise, but mostly about the data that these companies have from previous surveys that they have at their disposal to do the comparisons. We don't own data sets such as that would show productivity and levels of cost structure of different organizations around the world.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Vinola. Mr. Johns, please, for 6 minutes.
Minister, you're aware that McKinsey recently settled a huge lawsuit in the United States for their role in advising clients on how to boost opioids like OxyContin. Here in Canada, you've heard me speak to you repeatedly on this about the toxic drug supply and how it's killing thousands of people. Do you think it's appropriate that government of Canada is rewarding companies like McKinsey million-dollar contracts given their previous involvement in contributing to the ongoing toxic drug crisis in this country?
Mr. Johns, we have an integrity process in terms of analysing whether companies should continue to do business with the Government of Canada. And my understanding is that, notwithstanding, again, what I've heard through the media, McKinsey was not excluded from doing business with the Government of Canada. Mr. Thompson has had some thoughts about our integrity regime as it currently exists, and perhaps he could address how it works and maybe how it should work, or are there thoughts about change?
I think if he's going to do that, I'd like to hear Mr. Thompson, you talk about what the threshold is and what is the disqualifying, characteristics of a company like this to make them ineligible, because clearly they've had problems in South Africa, in France. This is a company that's riddled in scandal after scandal, and Canadian taxpayers deserve to know what that threshold is.
So thank you for the question. We certainly carefully monitor the situation, the allegations, the activities that the member has mentioned. As the minister noted, these activities have not triggered our integrity regime in the sense that there have been no convictions, criminal convictions of an affiliate would be the trigger for our integrity.
Right, a $600 million lawsuit, that they've settled. They'd maybe not be convicted, but clearly this says a lot, in terms of the court of public opinion. And I imagine most Canadians would be pretty concerned about this. Also, I think, what do you say to those healthcare workers that we all agree around this table are that were heroes in the pandemic, that that are they're burnt out, they're on the front line of this toxic drug crisis. What do you say to them when they know that a for-profit company created medical advice that was counter to the needs of the public health system? What do you say to those workers?
I would say, Mr. Johns, that I appreciate your comments and certainly the sentiments that accompany them. This is precisely why the deputy had approached me a couple of months ago, I believe, in terms of looking again at our integrity regime. And so we certainly are committed to doing that.
In terms of, I'm looking at outsourcing, and right now, you've got your advertising agent, Cossette Media, right now. They've been locking out their workers, the ACTRI union, right now. You've talked about passing anti-scab legislation. Are you serious about it? Because, right now we're seeing one of your contractors locking out workers. And do you think it's appropriate for the Government of Canada to provide contracts to companies that are hiring scab workers to replace unionized workers?
Mr. Johns, I have no knowledge of anything that you have just said. I am not aware of any contract and who you're talking about.
Okay, well, I'm hoping you'll look into it, because I think it comes down to integrity when it comes to procurement.
Is this a contract, just to understand your question, that PSPC has a contract with a certain company?
Yes. Cossette Media does most of your advertising, and so ACTRA is one of the suppliers, and they're locked out right now, and this isn't okay. So I think when we get back to the bigger issue, and you've heard me talk about the bigger issue, like the 6 companies that are in the 100-plus procurement club, over $100 million procurement club over the last decade. So we've seen, public services and procurement double. The outsourcing to this big 6, I'm going to call them, over the Conservative regime, fourfold under your government. And this is despite the Prime Minister, who made a campaign promise in 2015 to cut back, actually, on outsourcing. He put forward a platform to free up $3 billion a year through a spending review, which would include, he quote, reducing the use of external consultants. That hasn't happened. It's actually become a runaway ship. And I guess, can you explain, why so much outsourcing is necessary under your government, knowing full well that the government can hire, train, and employ full-time workers within the Government of Canada's workforce?
Mr. Johns, I agree with you that the numbers speak for themselves, and they certainly have grown, as you've stated.
It's not just growth. It's a tenfold increase, like 10 times, just with the Big Six. It was $50 million a year in 2011, and now it's over $500 million. This is a runaway train. It's out of control. I guess what I'm needing to hear from you and hoping to hear from you today is, what are you going to do to stop it and live up to the promise the Prime Minister made?
Let's put it this way. This is precisely why this review is taking place. This is why I acknowledged in my opening remarks that this committee is undertaking a very serious and important study.
I guess, do you plan on increasing or decreasing the amount of outsourcing? What's your plan?
We want to look at every possible way to give value for Canadians. And we will do that in a comprehensive and systematic way with the assistance of the Procurement Ombudsman.
And that's our time. Thanks, Mr. Johns. Mrs. Block, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister Jaczek, for joining us today. You were appointed Minister of PSPC on August 31st, 2022. Is that correct?
I remember that date. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and when you took over this portfolio, were you briefed on the process for awarding contracts?
I was given a more general briefing in terms of the process, the delegation that has occurred through our public officials based on the value of the contracts. We've heard a little bit of an allusion to that. I would say that there was no in-depth briefing because, of course, we trust our public officials.
Thank you. Were you advised of any favored firms at the time?
Absolutely not.
Okay. How many contracts has PSPC awarded since you've been minister?
I will have to turn to the officials who have been awarding those contracts.
That's okay. If you don't know, I'm fine that you don't have that answer for me. Can you tell me how many ongoing contracts or multi-year contracts McKinsey currently has?
I believe this is the 24 figure that you've heard from the deputy.
Okay, and that's in ongoing contracts. So we've heard the number of 101 million, but ongoing contracts could mean that there is still much more to be paid to McKinsey. Is that correct?
I will turn to the deputy who knows the details of the contracts.
Thank you for that question. Any additional contracts that would be ongoing are the ones that my colleague Molly mentioned that might be the responsibility of other departments that have not yet been recorded in the system. So that's where we see newer activity, but the contracts that we have on record issued by PSPC, current and ongoing, is 24.
So tell me, let's talk about the contract with PSPC for Phoenix. Originally, that contract was worth $4.9 million in 2020, and it has been amended 3 times to a total of $27.7 million. Can you tell us what work McKinsey is doing? And just as a side note, it has been reported they've been hired to streamline processes and standardize work at the Public Service Pay Center. But I believe you yourself in a previous meeting advised us that the backlog was growing. And so I want to turn back to the minister and ask her if this is a concern to her in regards to the quality of work that McKinsey is offering. And is it a concern that we have ongoing contracts that were originally worth $4.9 million and that have been amended 3 times to be 8 times the total to $27.7 million?
Ms. Block, I do believe that the number is actually 29.6 million, again, because this is the latest information that we have. In terms of the work that's being done, this is the Accelerator project. I think, as you alluded to, it is to assist with training of personnel and so on. I have been told that the backlog has been stabilized in terms of Phoenix itself. So we have, as you know, increased the number of public servants that are administering the pay center, but we have also had McKinsey assist with efficiencies and productivity, and the deputy does have some statistics on those.
No, I have other questions that I'd like to ask of you, Madam Minister. Dominic Barton spoke of McKinsey doing pro bono work for the federal government. Are you familiar with this practice?
Nope.
Could you then provide some answers for me in regards to how many of these departments are actually having pro bono work done by McKinsey?
I will turn to the deputy to see if that is something that can be collated for you.
So thank you for the question. The notion of pro bono work is not something that we entertain as part of PSPC's contracts, and that, I guess, could be a question directed at other departments for relationships that they have, but I'm not in a position to speak to what other departmental practices would be.
So is there any pro bono work being done for PSPC at this time by McKinsey?
There is no pro bono work.
Right. That's our time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Block. Mrs. Thompson, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister. And it's good to see both of your co-workers or the department heads. So I'd like to begin, if I could, asking if you can tell us why there's procurement of professional services and why would McKinsey be used. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Well, I think this is a question that we're all asking. Obviously, there are times when there is specific expertise that is required, and the deputy has referred to some of the benchmarking projects that do require data that, in this case, McKinsey holds, and therefore this is very useful for us to know how we're doing compared to other jurisdictions. In terms of fluctuation, in terms of workload, there are times when there are specific projects that require additional staff, and it is not considered reasonable to necessarily increase our staff complement, which obviously costs a certain amount of money, if there is a time-limited project. And therefore, the use of a consultant coming in could really fit what is needed at that particular time. I think certainly from my perspective, I want to ensure value for money for Canadians. I want quality services and quality products, because of course we also contract for products, not just management services, as is the case that we're looking at today. That is absolutely paramount from my perspective, and I have certainly ensured that public officials within PSPC are very aware of my feelings on that matter.
Right, thank you. And if I could just follow up on something, the benchmarking you referenced, could you, or Mr. Thompson, could you explain what benchmarking services are and explain it in relation to what McKinsey has to offer?
Mr. Thompson.
Thank you for that question. So there's, I mentioned there are a range of companies with whom we have arrangements for benchmarking services. They each hold different proprietary tools and instruments which should be used to compare different aspects of government activity, whether it's an internal corporate service function or a client or a citizen-facing service. It would be data sets that would compare the cost structure, for example, of that activity to those of other organizations, and give a guide to either some continuous improvement work that a department might be doing, or it could also be helpful if there's a deeper business transformation underway to know where our current service posture is relative to other comparable entities.
So, and how would McKinsey fit into that understanding of benchmarking?
McKinsey, as I understand, has 9 techniques or data analytic tools that they deploy in circumstances like this. Again, other companies would have different toolkits. They would have relative areas of specialization when it comes to IT systems versus business models and strategies, but it would be up to departments to choose which benchmarking approach and tool would be best for the circumstances in question.
I also thank you, and Minister, I'm not sure if you're the best one to answer this, or again, if it goes to Ms. Ward or Mr. Thompson. But in terms of the contracts, as COVID became the reality in the global space, the contracts that were that the government initiated at that time and during the period of lockdown, could you speak about the processes around having to procure supports at such a large amount in such a short period of time?
I think I should turn to officials. Clearly, I was not in the role, so perhaps Mr. Thompson could help.
Thank you, Minister. I would start by indicating that these instruments that we spoke of before, standing offers or supply arrangements, are ways of facilitating procurements that can be very complex, as the Minister noted. These instruments allow some of that work to be done ahead of time. For example, pre-qualifying suppliers so that there's fewer steps to complete an actual contract when there's a defined need for the services. And I don't know if, Molly, you want to add anything in the COVID context of how these instruments...
I would just add to what the deputy said in the COVID context that we would have assessed each requirement that was brought forward to us for what would be the appropriate mechanisms. Given the urgency of the situation, we would have employed a range of tools based on our policies and guidelines and made the decision in order to deliver as quickly as possible on behalf of the government. So we would have employed a range of tools in those circumstances. Some would be done in the supply arrangements.
Sorry, I'm afraid to interrupt you, but that's our time. Mrs. Vinola for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I think, Mr. Thompson, you spoke of surveys for which the contracts are based on data sets which are property of McKinsey. And those data are absolutely necessary in order to develop the tools to conduct analyses, etc. How is it that we pay to have surveys done, but that the data, which is the data of Canadian citizens, is not considered as property of the Crown and not private proprietary information? It's as if McKinsey was trying to influence Canada in order to get contracts by saying, well, no, these are my methods, these are my quantitative and qualitative methodology and data. From what we've heard here last week in this committee, that the public service in Canada is in the Stone Age. We have no one who's capable of doing analytics of these data. I've been trying to understand the situation, but I don't understand.
Absolutely.
Yes, well, thank you very much for the question. When I talk about data, it's not data concerning government operations in Canada. It's data sets that belong to or stem from other orders of government, other countries, European Parliament, for example. These are the data that they're using to compare and analyze the activities and compare Canadian performance with others. The data is not, it's not Canadian government data.
Information as to a firm like McKinsey, who would then use their data sets of information they've gathered from around the world, from other private sector partners, to make comparisons and analysis.
Mais normalement, les données.
But usually the data of the countries, if they're not public, they shouldn't be using them to use them for comparative analyses and offer them to a third party, whether it be Canada or China. So why are these data being used, particularly from countries that are not exactly friendly?
Maybe Minister, Mr. Thompson, you can provide that answer in writing to the committee, please. Mr. Jones,
we
please,
will.
for 2.5 minutes.
Minister, we believe that companies that, are doing business with Canada should be behaving ethically, both here in Canada and abroad, and that they should always be held to the highest standard, when it comes to responsible business conduct. And they should be held to account when they fail to also meet those standards. Now, we know that McKinsey, heard from from Mr. Thompson that they weren't convicted of a crime, but they settled a $600 million lawsuit for their role. And I guess it might not have passed your integrity test in terms of shutting them down. What would it take to meet that test and to exclude a company? And maybe, if you could, also table the integrity data that allows Mackenzie to bid. Could you do that for this committee?
We can certainly give you the process that the integrity regime currently includes. Mr. Deputy, would you? Yeah.
Great. I'm going to interrupt for 2 seconds, Mr. Johns. Do we have the will of the committee that the department table this, please, to the committee, please? Seeing no nays, then please do. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Johns.
I guess I still didn't get to the point what the bar is, but I'm hoping that you'll explain that. And you know, Minister.
Mr. Johns, I think the deputy can say exactly what the bar is now to exclude a company.
Okay.
Yeah.
As I was indicating, the bar for an affiliate of a Canadian company is a conviction. There are some activities we can pursue. If it's a direct activity of a Canadian direct supplier, a charge against a company would also be a trigger for an integrity action.
I think sometimes a lawsuit of this magnitude should be considered. I think it should be reviewed. Now, I know that there's many aspects of contracting out. Problems arrive with an over-reliance on this approach. We're seeing that clearly right now. It's high cost, lack of competition. We all remember Phoenix and, sole source contracts that ended up costing hundreds of millions of dollars, demoralized the public service. Also, we saw the cuts under the Conservatives happen to the public service and outsourcing increase. I guess, we know it hurts morale. What are you going to do to turn around the morale in the public service, Minister? Because they're not very happy right now, seeing what's going on.
That's a very big question, and
you have about 30 seconds to answer.
I'm sure as a government that we have said many times that we value our public officials and the contribution they make. We know that they work hard. We know that they're doing what they are through their employment that they are supposed to be doing. And I have every confidence that the public service within PSPC is going to do everything they can to ensure that we have good morale and people know that they're achieving what they need to.
When's that going to happen? Like this runaway ship's it's not going to happen the way things are going.
I would have to disagree with you. I think the people that I have met within PSPC are totally dedicated to their jobs. They understand the importance of their jobs, and that we, as the government, are very
servants are happy with.
I'm afraid
that's our time.
I disagree with you.
Let you go a bit longer, and Minister, I'll let you go longer as well. Mr. Barrett, for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, were you aware of the ethical record of McKinsey, and have you become aware of it since taking on this role as minister? That they held a corporate retreat adjacent to a concentration camp. Our Parliament recognized that there's a genocide happening there. One of the concentration camps, they held a retreat next to it. That this same company is embroiled in a corruption scandal in South Africa. This same company is embroiled in election interference scandal in France, and this same company paid out $600 million US, that's almost $800,000 Canadian, for paying bonuses to pharmacists when there were opioid deaths, when they overprescribed drugs like OxyContin.
No, I was not aware, Mr. Barrett.
When did you become aware when did you become aware of McKinsey's involvement and their payment of that settlement?
Through the testimony at this committee last week.
Okay. And since that time, Minister, have you taken any action to end the Government of Canada's business with that company?
As we have already discussed, I have discussed with staff, the deputy, that we need to look very closely at our integrity regime.
No, not looking, Minister, looking closely is not going to cut it. This is a company that is devoid of values and is completely antithetical to everything that this country stands for. Do you feel that you have a moral obligation to end the Government of Canada's business with this company based on what you've heard at this committee?
I need to investigate the matter further and be sure of the facts, Mr.
If you were assured that McKinsey, in their work for Purdue Pharma, advised them on how to supercharge the sales of opioids, would that be sufficient for you to end the business of the Government of Canada with McKinsey?
I believe in very thorough investigations of all charges, and I'm certainly not in a position to advocate for ending any type of contract with McKinsey at this point in time.
Well, Minister, I think that would be very disappointing to hear for the victims of the work of this company. Do you think that it's appropriate corporate conduct for a company like McKinsey to hold a corporate retreat adjacent to a concentration camp? Do you think that that's appropriate?
I just have heard this from you just right now.
And having heard it, do you believe that to be appropriate?
I would need to check that your facts are correct, Mr.
If
Barrett.
my facts are correct, do you believe it to be appropriate?
I can only say I would need the full facts before I came to a conclusion.
Well, this is a matter of public record. And would you say that...
I have not seen that public record.
Okay. So it's been reported in Canadian media. It's been reported in international media. Whose responsibility would it be in your department to brief you on something like that with respect to the actions of a contractor of the Government of Canada?
Obviously, the public officials that we rely upon, my deputy and associate staff.
So now knowing that that's been reported in media, do you believe that that's something you ought to have been made aware of when it was reported?
I'm not sure if Mr. Thompson was aware. Perhaps we can
Madam Minister,
require him.
it's your responsibility. Ultimately, the buck stops with you.
I take my responsibilities very seriously, Mr. Barrett. We will look into all these allegations.
And would you be willing to report back to this committee on on the decision-making process that you arrive at?
At the request of the full committee, I have no doubt I will make any appearance possible.
Well, Chair, I just asked for consensus for the minister to table the information that she's already gathered.
Do we have the will of the committee for that? So be it. We do. Thank you.
Okay, I look forward to that. How many times has McKinsey met or communicated with the minister or staff in your department?
I have never communicated with McKinsey. I cannot speak for anybody else.
How many times has your staff met with them?
I have inquired of my staff today, and they say never.
So no one from PSPC has ever met or spoken with
my
anyone
political
from McKinsey?
staff inform me, the current staff in my office have said to me very clearly they have had no communication with McKinsey.
Has past staff?
How would I know? I can certainly inquire.
Madam Minister, you're making an appearance at the Standing Committee on Government Operations, and it was even reported in media today that this company isn't registered to lobby when they're clearly lobbying the government. And you didn't think to ask your staff how many times people in that department had met with this company when they've done more than $100 million in business?
I clarified very, I think, succinctly that the staff in my office have never met or communicated with McKinsey.
Minister,
that's our time, Mr. Barrett.
Those are disappointing answers, to say the least.
Mr. Baines for, I'm sorry, my floor here. Mr. Baines for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and the staff for joining us today. Minister, do you make the decisions when internal or external expertise is sought?
Mr. Baines, I responded, no, I do not.
Right. I just wanted to clarify that. Can you please share with us details on McKinsey and Company as a supplier of procurement instruments established by PSPC?
Mr. Baines, are you referring to the fact that McKinsey was pre-qualified in terms of standing office supply arrangements, or?
Procurement, like, I'll rephrase. Like, can you give us information about the contracts awarded to McKinsey by client departments and how decisions to procure professional services works with client departments?
Okay. So, Mr. Thompson, perhaps you have been able to collate some of the information related to departments.
So, as was mentioned previously, the 24 contracts, with the exception of 2, were administered by PSPC, but we had client departments for whom we were putting these contracts in place. Beyond that, there are contracts that individual departments would do within their own delegations. That is not something we have a line of sight to. That's part of the Treasury Board's work in following up and conducting the review. Although any contract that a department has over $10,000 would be disclosed individually by those departments. So that's the way it would work. If it's above a certain threshold, it would come to PSPC to be the contracting agent, and we would execute the procurement on behalf of a client department.
Okay, and then can you explain the difference between supply arrangements and standing offers?
Again, to the deputy.
Thank you for the question. They're both instruments used to help facilitate procurements. The supply arrangements, as I mentioned, do some of the steps of a procurement in advance, particularly the pre-qualification of companies. They would be put on a list for a range of services, but it does not constitute a contract. A standing offer goes a little bit further than that and actually puts in place a pricing mechanism so that goods or services could be procured at a predetermined price as well and called up by a department. So they're different instruments that help facilitate procurement by other government departments.
Okay, so what are the advantages of having supply arrangements and how valuable are they?
They're very valuable, and as my colleague Molly was alluding to earlier, they were particularly useful during the pandemic to facilitate and speed up the procurement process by doing some of it in advance and having that work ready to go and just finalizing contracts on the remaining pieces under those two instruments.
Okay, and maybe to the minister, do you have any oversight in selecting bidders?
Absolutely not, Mr. Baines. In fact, as you probably know, we have recently gone through an ITQ process related to administering the dental plan for Canadians, which is obviously an important policy of our government. And I was completely blind to the 6 people that put forward an intention to qualify. They were blinded to me, and now that 3 are moving forward through that process, they are again blinded. So I have no knowledge of which companies are moving forward. And how they will be processed and how they will be evaluated, that will not be known to me at any stage.
Okay, thank you. And maybe back to Mr. Thompson. How many federal contracts have been awarded to McKinsey since 2011? Do you have a number on that?
Well, unfortunately, I'm only in a position to speak to the contracts issued by Public Services and Procurement, which is the 24 I mentioned. So, and the Treasury Board Secretariat is doing further work to gather the information on departments and what they would have done individually with their own authorities.
And how far do those go back?
We are looking back to 2011.
Okay. And then again, with total value, all of that would be determined after that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. How much time do I have, Chair?
13 seconds.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answers. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Baines. Mr. Paul Hoos, welcome back again, Togo.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good afternoon, Madam Minister, witnesses. At the beginning of the meeting, you stated, I think, that McKinsey was not registered as a lobbyist with the federal government. Were you aware of that before this morning when it was announced on Radio-Canada?
The Radio-Canada.
Okay. But not before. Well, in dealing with contracts, without a call to tender, before according a contract, which goes beyond the threshold, you need a certain number of circumstances. What are the particular circumstances that might allow that D&D, for example, went forward without non-competitive bids?
I will have to turn to the deputy or to Ms. Royd.
Thanks very much for the question, Mr. Chair. So in the circumstances surrounding the National Master Standing Offer, which I believe is what is being referred to, there is a requirement for us to confirm that the work in question that is being brought forward by our client department is consistent with the scope of work associated with the standing offer, as well as funding requirement associated with that. We facilitate the call up against the standing offer tool on behalf of the department. We addressed previously the circumstances for putting in place the overarching standing offer already, but in that instance, because it was a proprietary data sets and methodologies.
Je m'excuse, Madame Roy.
Excuse me, Madam Roy, but the question is further than that. The totality of the contracts that were offered without competition for D&D, for immigration, for the Canadian Border Services, they were offered because of emergency or urgent circumstances. What was so urgent that D&D was allowed to do so, that immigration and all the other departments, why were they able to go ahead with non-competitive offers? Well, thank you. The use of this instrument is not a matter of emergency or urgency. It's intellectual property. It's a proprietary information, which is the benchmark data, which was used as the tool by these other departments, such as military establishment. So only McKinsey could do the work? Is that it? Well, there are 4 other firms which have the same pre-qualification in the National Masters Standing Offer for comparative analyses and analytics. What are these 5? I don't have the list with me, but perhaps my colleague does. Yes, go ahead, ma'am. The other.
That we have National Master Standings offers with for benchmarking services are Forrester, CEB, Infotech, and Gartner.
OK, merci. Autre exemple que j'aimerais comprendre.
All right. For other examples, perhaps, for the use of McKinsey, the Canada Investment Bank, the first thing that Madame Hudon did, $4.9 million went out to McKinsey. Why would Madame Hudon, former ambassador to France for Canada, the first thing they do is they give $4.9 million to McKinsey? Her group wasn't too happy, but who advised her that she should offer this contract to McKinsey?
Have no knowledge whatsoever of this, Deputy.
I would just offer 2 points: that Crown corporations have their own procurement authorities and typically work outside the services of PSPC. However, BDC in one instance did make use of our National Master Standing Offer for benchmarking in the amount of $3.4 million. So that was one transaction that we executed on their behalf. But that's more of an exception. Crown corporations generally manage independently their own procurement.
Mais je comprends que les sociétés d'État.
Okay, I understand that Crown corporations do have arm's length kind of agreements, but she came in from Europe. She took a break, a couple of years, and then the first thing goes out is a contract to McKinsey. Someone must have counseled her to do so. Every meeting that we have, we get the same thing. Everybody's working in a silo, and in the meantime, hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent out of the public purse. We had no one advised her to
provided in writing to the committee. Now we have Mrs. Thompson, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. And probably, Mr. Thompson, to you on this, and it's going back to comments that were made earlier around data analytics, and where the comment that McKinsey has a set of data analytics that helpful for the particular contract. But could you speak about the relevance of data analytics with benchmarking and how they link? That it's not the same, but how they're interconnected.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I noted, there's a range of different benchmarking methodologies and services. McKinsey comes with a certain toolkit of methodologies and data sets that they can use. They're used often by service providing organizations. ESDC, for example, Employment and Social Development Canada, has used these services to compare its offerings to those of other peer organizations. It's been used by CBSA, EDC, and BDC as well, Export Development Canada, Business Development Bank, and the Department of National Defence. It can be used in a service delivery context. It can also be used for very in-depth IT comparisons between the cost of running an IT system in one organization versus another, the development cost, the run cost. There's a host of different situations that all benefit from this kind of independent review. The last thing I would note is that the Treasury Board policy on management of projects actually requires and encourages independent advice on these large transformation projects that are undertaken by the government. So it's part of the due diligence on a large project.
Thank you. And certainly as we modernize legacy systems and further digitalize operations and services, obviously increased investment, IT investment is essential. Could you explain when it makes sense for government to use internal resources and when the existing resources within government need to be supplemented by an outside source?
So the minister has noted a few such examples when we don't have access to the expertise, the skill sets in question, or it's not the type of skill set that we would need on our payroll on a permanent basis. It could be that we need it on a very time-limited basis for a defined period of time. It could be in relation to an initiative that only has temporary funding. So again, it would not be appropriate to hire a full-time public servant if we had a 6-month project to undertake or a 12-month project. And this circumstance where we really do look for independent advice from outside the public service to help give critical perspectives on a project. So those are some circumstances.
And, would you mind, again, it's open to whoever would like to take the question, if you could really go into more depth in terms of that integrity process and really how PC really ensures the fair and open, transparent process in how you award contracts.
Well, on the question of fairness, our default is to competitive processes, and there's only a specific set of circumstances where we move to non-competitive instruments. I mentioned one, the intellectual property. On the transparency and openness, the bidding processes are very visible. We encourage, to the extent possible, multiple bids on competitive processes, and the results of contracts are posted publicly on every department's website. Another feature on the fairness would be fairness monitors that we put in place for large contracts, just to ride along with the process and provide an independent assurance that the contract was issued fairly and appropriately. So those are some of the measures that we have on fairness and transparency, and that's in addition to the integrity regime, which the minister spoke about earlier in response to some of the other some questions.
Thank you. What government contract, or when the government contracts with McKinsey, what measures, if any, are in place to ensure that government information is not shared with other organizations that contract with McKinsey?
And a relatively short answer, please.
Sorry, just to clarify, this is the provisions related to conflict of interest?
Protection of information.
Information, so the information that came about through the contract.
Right. So we would have specific clauses in the contracts associated with those requirements to ensure the protection of information. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Mrs. Vinola for 2.5, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ms. Jessic, to whom must consultancy groups report to? To whom are they authorized to report back to? To whom must they be accountable? When these firms of expertise are used, to whom are they accountable? Yes.
I think the question is, if we're contracting to McKinsey, who are they accountable to?
Who is McKinsey accountable to? To the contracting department, or in the case of a direct contract with PSPC, to PSPC, but always to public officials?
Et en ce qui concerne les outils utilisés.
As to the toolkits, those used by our staff, our personnel, and that's fairly well shared within the public service, they're responsible to the public who pay their salaries through taxes, through government revenue. How then would McKinsey, when using their toolkits, are not as transparent to those who are actually paying through their taxes for these contracts? And how can it be that the data be protected, but McKinsey can use them elsewhere in the world to do other comparative analytics, to offer advice to other countries which are not necessarily our allies or our friends?
I think, Madame Vignola, you are asking, McKinsey gets data from us, and then they potentially can use it in perhaps this benchmarking process for other contracts that they hold worldwide. Is that what you're getting at? The privacy of that information?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there any provision in our contracts to guard against
Brief answer, please, Mr.
the
Thompson.
use of that data?
The answer is yes. There would be limitations on how that data can be used. It would vary, I think, from contract to contract, but there are provisions, and that often the information we see from another country or another entity would be anonymized data, so it would not have a company name or a country name. These are usually anonymized data sets that protect the identity of the organization in question.
Thanks. Mr. Johns for 2.5, please.
Minister, we get it that there's times that we don't have internal capacity and the government needs to turn to external help, but these should be of last resort, not the government's first call. The problems here are coming from excessive use of costly outsourcing, leading to higher costs and lower quality services. And we know that public service professionals in the public service, they're focused on giving taxpayers value and delivering the vital services that Canadians rely on. Do you actually think that this amount of outsourcing of government work is appropriate and that good paying union jobs within the government are not worth pursuing instead?
I think we need to look at it very closely, Mr. Johns. I actually agree with the preamble to your question. I think we need to look at it very, very closely. I think we need to look at who we're hiring and where there are opportunities to ensure that we have sufficient internal staff with the qualifications, the skills that we need to perform the tasks in front of us. And I would come at this question very much from the same place as you're coming.
I get it when it comes to surge. It feels like it's a surge all the time when you've got a tenfold increase of outsourcing to these big companies. And I'll speak about big companies a little bit because we know there's thousands of skids in the National Emergency Strategic Stockpile that are ready to expire soon. And when it comes to resupplying the stockpile, I guess my question is PSPC going to sole source the tenders to these billionaire multinationals, or are they actually going to give small and medium Canadian companies a chance to bid on the replacement of these? Because we know in the House in 2021, there was a unanimous consent motion that was passed to provide Canadian-made PPE around Parliament in federal government departments. And a year later, the foreign-made PPE is still, being supplied to the government. Why hasn't this motion been honored? And what are you going to do to intend that SMEs get a share of that?
Mr. Deputy.
I would just note, Mr. Chair, that since the onset of the pandemic, there have been significant strides in Canadian-produced PPE, and the volume has shifted considerably towards Canadian
Most of the
suppliers.
we're talking to are saying they're still sitting on it. And you also said that a conviction, back to the conviction part, disqualifies affiliate companies from working with the government, and a charge disqualifies suppliers. Now, McKinsey has been charged criminally in South Africa, is my understanding. Why is the bar higher for suppliers than affiliates? Because it sounds like McKinsey would be disqualified if only they were a supplier instead of an affiliate.
I'm afraid that's our time. Perhaps
Maybe you
could
can provide
an
that in
answer in
writing. That would
writing
be
to
good.
that specific question. Thanks, Mr. Johns. Mr. Barrett for 5, and then we'll finish up with Mr. Shawari for 5.
Why, in response to Mr. Johns, why is the threshold different?
So the policy regime does have two levels, one for domestic direct suppliers, the corporate entity with whom we're doing business, and one for affiliates. And these aren't about automatic ineligibility. The thresholds that I was talking about are what trigger a review of the process, and then it can result in suspension. It can result in administrative agreements. There's various arrangements that can be pursued under the existing policy, but as the minister noted, the existing policy is being looked at, and there's a range of improvements that are on the table.
There's an email that's been received by this committee. It's dated March 26, 2020. It's from Kevin D'Entremont at McKinsey to a department official pitching a meeting on COVID response with Mr. Andrew Pickersgill. Did that meeting happen?
I would have to turn to my officials to see what they know about the issue you're talking about.
I'm not aware of that particular meeting, but I would say as part of the government's call to action, there was a very high volume of outreach to companies of all descriptions during that period. So,
if the meeting occurred, would a record exist?
I would have to look into that. It would likely be on the record, but I can't confirm that on the spot.
Okay, it's a pretty through Chair. It's a very narrow event that we're looking for information on. The date, the names have been provided. What I'm looking to find out and wondering if you would undertake to provide to the committee, if that did occur, and who was at the meeting, and how many other times did those individuals meet with Misters D'Entremont or Pickersgill. And so if you're willing to undertake to provide that very narrow search request to the committee, I think it would be very helpful, because there were questions raised in media reporting today with respect to whether this organization, whether McKinsey should have been registered to lobby. It's not on designated public office holders to get individuals to register to lobby. It's on the lobbyists to register. So I think that information would be very helpful, and it would expedite that process in getting that information if you provided it to this committee. And then that would be in the domain where the lobbying commissioner would also have access to that information.
Let me interrupt, Mr. Barrett. I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume you're asking it's the will of the committee to ask the Minister's office and Mr. Thompson to provide that to the committee?
It is, Chair.
Okay. Any objections? None. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Okay.
So I was going to make a point of clarification that the department is not the repository for the lobbying registry.
I appreciate that.
So those registrations are done by the individual who has the obligations with the office of the
100%.
registry.
But the information with respect to those meetings would be something that a record would exist with your department if it happened.
We are occasionally asked by the lobbying commissioner to validate and check on those kinds of information. So if it's in that context,
yeah, great. That I appreciate. I appreciate that. In the email that I referenced, mentions Dominic Barton. They name drop him. Is that name have currency amongst departmental officials or with you, Minister, or your cabinet colleagues?
Me with the name of Dominic Barton at all. So I can only speak for myself.
Okay. It seems odd for someone to name drop another individual unless they thought it was going to get them past the doorman. One more question. Dominic Barton is reported in public accounts as having been paid $150,000 for other services by Global Affairs, while he was also ambassador to China. What was he paid for?
Really, I would have no knowledge of such a transaction.
Is that something that the department would have records on?
The deputy is saying no. It would be the Global Affairs Department.
Okay, and so that contract, it would be necessary to get that information from the minister responsible for global affairs. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
That's our time. We're going to finish up with Mr. Jawari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And full disclosure, my background is management consulting, so the question I'm about to ask is intended to demystify a number of terminology that's been used and been thrown around, and then it will lead into a question. Mr. Thompson, we talked about a number of concepts, benchmarking, analytics, data, and I'll throw KPI in there as well. And the way I understand how things works is that when an organization is going through a transformation with the intention of improving its processes and its policies, they will look at jurisdiction and they would look at the data that exists, and then they use that data to compare with the data that's gathered within the organization, and then they compare it, and then they can run analytics, and then those data is usually gathered around key performance indicators, and then there's a transformation roadmap that's been developed. Is my understanding of how at least we've used the terminology of benchmark data and analytics correct in the concept of the last hour and a half that we've been talking?
That's a very accurate description of the work.
Thank you. So now I really want to get to the question and the purpose of the why. So are you, as a public servant, are you expected to have the benchmark data that exists in other jurisdictions, or to be an expert, or anybody within your department is expected to be an expert in having that benchmark data?
As I mentioned, when we're undertaking a business transformation, whether it's PSPC or another department, the Treasury Board policy on project management encourages independent reviews and perspectives. Benchmarking is one tool that brings credibility and precision to a business transformation plan. Perfect.
So you talked about specifically McKinsey has 9 benchmarking tools. Okay. In PSPC itself went through a transformation around payment, improving their process, etc. And I believe your department might have used one of those benchmarking tools. Okay. And would anyone within your department have the expertise to develop that data aside from the base data that you're gathering from your department?
So we would have good information on our own operations, but we wouldn't have the basis to compare it with with peer organizations. So if we were comparing the pay center to private sector or public sector pay operations, if we're comparing our pension operation to pension plans, et cetera, and what these companies do is bring in an analytical framework for doing just that.
Okay. Perfect. So thank you for that. So therefore, there is a need, and there's a justifiable need to be able to bring external resources. I'm talking a much broader, rather than just McKinsey or other consulting firm. So there is a need, and there is a reasonable why. Now, let's talk about the data and the fact that the privacy of the data is protected. During the time that benchmarking exercise was done for your department, were you at any time aware whether these specific data that's being benchmarked is specific to a given client? Or was it this is a pool of data that's been normalized or anonymized, and therefore it's that pool of data without any reference to a specific client that was used?
So thank you. Typically, the benchmarking reports that I've seen have anonymized data. It will refer to an insurance company or a comparable country. Occasionally, when there's publicly sourced information as part of the benchmarking, there will be more clearly identified company. But a lot of this, the information gathered is proprietary and commercially confidential. So as a result, it's often protected.
Okay, and therefore, is it fair to assume that the data that's being gathered by doing benchmarking for the Government of Canada, specifically to PSPC, there's a highly unlikely opportunity for it to be identified as Government of Canada's data in other benchmarking exercises?
I believe that to be correct, with the possible exception of publicly available information that they could obviously, that any of these companies or anybody else could
Absolutely.
use.
I mean, the number of employees that the Government of Canada has is publicly available.
Right.
But where we're talking about the performance of a procurement process or how long it takes, etc., that's might not be publicly available as well. Okay, I'm 13 seconds over, so thank you very much for your indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jouari. Thank you for joining us. Before we go, I'm going to invoke Chairman's prerogative. Just a couple of things. Several questions were asked that you're going to get back to us on, as well as asking for, we've been asked, sent for documents. I asked will the committee will set a date of Friday the 17th at noon for these documents. Agreed. Thank you. On the chairman's prerogative, I've been dealing with the procurement ombudsman for 7 years now, part of this committee. If you read his annual reports and you meet with him, you'll see repeatedly that his recommendations are not actually put into force. Will, Minister, you guarantee that the recommendations he puts in on this are put into force and not just pushed aside like his other recommendations over the years?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have met with the procurement ombudsman and had a very full discussion with him and was very impressed by
But will you be
what he
accepting and
has to
implementing
offer.
all of his recommendations?
Obviously, we'll look at them very, very closely. I cannot commit to immediately accepting all recommendations, but I feel sure that they will be
The reason I ask that
very
is
carefully
you emphasize
considered.
that as one of the actions.
Yes.
And I will express my great concern that we are falling back on him, but we're not actually committing to that. So I'll leave that be. Mr. Thompson, Mr. Johns and Mr. Barrett and Minister as well brought up repeatedly this integrity test. Simple Google putting in 3 words, KPMG convictions fraud, Deloitte convictions fraud, Accenture convictions fraud, Deloitte convictions fraud, comes up with multiple pages of fraudulent activity around the world. McKinsey is not an affiliate. They are a sole company. So I'm wondering, I would just ask you to provide to this committee real black and white information of how this so-called integrity test is put into effect for these companies. We've asked repeatedly over the years of OGO. It's very clear. I'm aghast to hear that you were not aware of the McKinsey stuff. I was well aware, even though it wasn't part of our study, well aware of all the issues with KPMG and Accenture. A simple Google check. Not that I'm doubting the honesty of what was said today, but I find it extremely concerning that a simple Google check that shows massive amount of concerns with these companies somehow doesn't stop them from receiving massive contracts from taxpayers. So I'll leave it at that. I appreciate your time. We're going to suspend very quickly for about 5 minutes as we bring in our new witnesses. We are suspended. You start. I just want to assure everyone that we have tested his mic and the audio with our interpreters, and we are good to go. Mr. Corey, for 5 minutes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. As introduced, my name is Aaron Corey, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And I'm pleased to be with you today and to accept the invitation to act as a witness in your study of federal government consulting contracts awarded to McKinsey & Company. The Canada Infrastructure Bank, or the CIB, is a federal crown corporation, reports to Parliament through the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. We were created to invest in revenue-generating infrastructure projects in Canada to benefit Canadians. We do this by working with governments, Indigenous communities, the private sector, and institutional investors to provide investment in projects that support economic growth, connect communities, and contribute to Canada's transition to a low-carbon economy. We work on investment opportunities from coast to coast to coast, which reflect priority sectors for investment: public transit, broadband, green infrastructure, clean power, and trade and transportation. And we invest in projects across each of those sectors that in particular reduce infrastructure gaps in Indigenous communities across the country. I cannot overstate the critical importance of infrastructure investment to our ability to meet climate goals, enhance productivity, and protect our quality of life. The CIB was created and the CIB Act was passed in June of 2017 with an inaugural board of directors appointed in November of 2017. And since then, we've been steadily building the institution and accelerating the pace of investment activity. The CIB got off to a slow start as it worked to establish the guardrails for projects it should and should not invest in, build relationships with infrastructure owners across the provinces, territories, municipalities, Indigenous communities, and private sector, and establish clear governance that allowed it to act decisively and independently in making investment decisions while ensuring close alignment with government policy and good transparency. The launch of the CIB's growth plan in the fall of 2020 marked a significant turning point for our organization, with clearer definition of priority investment areas, concrete investment goals, and clarified investment decision-making processes. And since then, the CIB's investment activities have rapidly accelerated. That's why I'm particularly proud to report that as at December 31st of 2022, the CIB has now made investment commitments of $8.6 billion across 43 projects, with a total capital cost of almost $25 billion. These are investments that will result in annual greenhouse gas emissions of more than 4.5 million tons, nearly 300,000 new homes connected to broadband, nearly 175,000 new transit riders every day, more than 60 million in agricultural value being added to the economy, and improvements across infrastructure in 26 Indigenous communities. This is real impact for Canadians in new broadband in southern Manitoba, electric buses on the road in Edmonton, new district energy systems powering Richmond, BC, reliable energy storage in rural Ontario, and rail expansion in northern Quebec and Labrador. Now, over the course of the CIB's work to exercise due diligence in our investment decisions and to ensure maximum return for Canadian taxpayers, the CIB does from time to time rely on the help of experts from external firms, accountants, lawyers, engineering and technical firms, and other consultants. The CIB has received the motion adopted by this committee on January 18th with respect to contracts with McKinsey & Company and is currently preparing our response, which will be provided to the committee within the prescribed timeline. As we've previously reported to Parliament in response to order paper questions, I can confirm that since our inception in 2017, the CIB has entered into 3 contracts with McKinsey & Company, all prior to my joining the CIB in November of 2020. 2 of the contracts were undertaken as part of the CIB's startup activities in 2018, and the final project was undertaken and completed in July of 2020. And the scope of this work included providing advice on the initial development of the CIB's criteria for investments and risk management governance and policies, and the later work assessing new strategic opportunities. In total, the value of contracts awarded by the CIB to McKinsey & Company was $1.43 million. To put that in context, it represents just under 5% of our total expenditure on professional service fees and about 1% of our total operating expenses. And all of our expenses, of course, including these professional fees, are reported annually to Parliament in our audited financial statements. Now, as honorable members of the committee may be aware, prior to my joining the CIB, I was the president and CEO of Infrastructure Ontario, which is a provincial crown agency responsible for financing, building provinces' infrastructure and real estate assets. And before that, I worked at McKinsey & Company between 2001 and 2012. As is clear in the timeline I've outlined, the CIB has not hired McKinsey & Company since I joined the organization in November of 2020. With that being said, I'd like to thank the chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. We are going to start with Mr. Paul Hoos for 6 minutes, please. And colleagues, we're going to do a very short second round. So we'll do rounds of 6 and a shorter second round because of the late time.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Chairman. And just to confirm with you, Mr. Corey, the concept of the investment bank in Canada was in fact proposed by McKinsey, correct?
CIB, merci pour la question. Thank you. The creation of the CIB predates my joining. As I mentioned, I joined in November of 2020. My understanding.
Mais ma question, est-ce que c'est McKinsey?
But it was McKinsey that developed the implementation plan for your bank?
I don't have awareness of that. I'm sorry.
OK, je peux vous le dire que oui. Puis,
well, I might be able to confirm that as a fact. You're a former employee of McKinsey. You said between 2001 and 12. Stephen Robbins, who is now the strategic chief of, and is Jaswal. You three individuals are in fact former members of McKinsey, and you are now occupying administrative positions with the Infrastructure Bank.
Yes, pas d'autres questions. Merci, Mme Lewis.
No further questions. Madam Lewis.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your question, and thank you, Mr. Corey, for your attendance here today. Did you personally hire Mr. Robbins or Mr. Jaswal?
Thanks for the question, Ms. Lewis. Yes, I did hire Mr. Robbins. He previously worked at Infrastructure Ontario as well. He had left McKinsey in or about, I think, 2014, had gone back to school and worked at Infrastructure Ontario, and I was part of hiring him. Mr. Jaswal joined us through an open competitive process through our HR department. He applied. I didn't know Mr. Jaswal prior to his application, which he went through the process, and I met him once he joined.
It was an open competitive process that happened to hire Mr. Jaswal, which was who formerly worked at McKinsey with you.
No, sorry, he didn't work at McKinsey with me. I left McKinsey in 2012. I believe he was there from 2016 to 18. We didn't know each other at all.
But he didn't work at McKinsey with you, but you both worked at McKinsey.
That's correct, at different times.
Worked at McKinsey. And the chair of the Minister of Finance Advisory Council on Economic Growth was Dominic Barton, who recommended the creation of the Infrastructure Bank. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. That was part of the work of the committee, yes.
How many former McKinsey employees have worked or currently work at the Infrastructure Bank since its inception?
4 of us, to my knowledge, the 3 that the member mentioned previously, and also my executive assistant.
Okay. And other than your executive assistant, are those all executive high-level positions?
No, Mr. Robbins, who's the head of strategy, is an executive position. He helps us identify investment priorities, identify the portfolios of investment we should make. Mr. Jaswal leads our work on portfolio strategy, how much money to allocate across different investment goals, but that's not an executive position. He's a director in our company.
Director, yes, thank you. Now, I understand that McKinsey and Company was awarded at least 4 consulting positions with the Infrastructure Bank. Is that correct?
My understanding is 3 separate contracts, all prior to my time, but 3 separate contracts. One had 2 phases to it, but 3 different pieces of work, yes.
So one had 2 phases, so that would probably, that's where I probably got the 4 from.
Yes, that's right. Yes, exactly.
Now, were you involved in the decision to award McKinsey the infrastructure contracts?
No, I wasn't. Those all predate my time at the CIB. I wasn't here. I was working for the province at the time.
Do you know whether there was a public request or a public request for quote or a tender process involved in awarding McKinsey those contracts with the Infrastructure Bank?
I really can't speak to the procurement that was used in the day. As I said, I wasn't an employee here and wasn't here for that. What I can tell you is that we do have a really clear procurement policy that we follow, similar to other crown corporations and the government itself, I'm sure. We have...
Mr. Corey, you're telling me that you have a fair process and there was no unfair advantage given to McKinsey executives in deciding which company would get the contract with the Infrastructure Bank, but it just so happened that 4 contracts went to McKinsey from the Infrastructure Bank. You're telling me that other businesses had a fair shot at those contracts?
I'm telling you that they were several years before I was here, so I really can't comment on the procurement process, but we do have very clear procurement policies around best value for money. And we use external advisors on our transactions because we're doing investments.
Coincidence. It's a coincidence. You see, Mr. Corey, the public sees this process as McKinsey stacking their loyalists on the Infrastructure Bank so that there could not be a fair tender process. And so other companies do not have the same advantage because the Infrastructure Bank has been stacked with McKinsey loyalists. That's what the public sees. Now, did you create a Chinese wall to ensure that McKinsey would not have this unfair advantage that the public is seeing?
And a very brief answer, please.
What I would say to that, to the public, is the fact of the matter is, since the time that any former McKinsey employees have worked at the CIB, McKinsey hasn't been hired to do $1 of work.
I'm sorry, that is our time. Thank you. Mr. Jouari, please.
Thank you and welcome to our committee, Mr. Corey. A bunch of rapid question. I'm hoping quick responses because I want to get to some debunking some of the themes that it's being created. So between 2001 2012, you were at McKinsey. My understanding is you were the leader in the public sector and capital project practice. Am I right?
Correct.
Tell me what was the amount of contract that you the McKinsey under your leadership would have had with the government of Canada during that period, roughly.
My primary work in the public sector was actually at the provincial level. I did work in both the province of Ontario and Saskatchewan at the time. In the federal government, I did relatively little work. It was around infrastructure, of course, and also economic competitiveness, and probably in total a very small amount. I don't want to quote a number.
Million, more than
1 to 2 million.
Great. And then in 2012, you moved to. Between 2012 and 2020, you were with, as you indicated, with the province of Ontario around infrastructure. Am I right?
Correct.
In that department, how many executives did you have working for you?
We had a team of 600 staff, 7 other executives who reported directly to me as the CEO.
Okay. Compared to CIB, which is currently, what's the number of staffs that you have currently reporting to you at total and at the executive level?
6 executives and a total size organization of 115 employees at CRISP. So we're small but mighty at the CIB.
Okay, great. So out of the 6 executive, aside from your executive assistant, how many are from McKinsey?
One also worked there, also a long time ago, but one also worked there.
Okay, and how many of them were in the past 5 years had worked for McKinsey?
No executives.
How many of them for the past 10 years had worked for McKinsey?
1 executive.
Okay. How many of them had worked? Can you talk to me about some of the work that you had done with the province of Ontario, others around the infrastructure, and the number of projects, and what was the results?
Of course. So my background was in large capital projects and project delivery. I started working entirely in the private sector. So I was working with large energy companies, renewable power companies, Canadian mining companies, on their work both in Canada and around the world. And through that work, I developed quite a bit of expertise around what it takes to get large-scale projects done, whether that's infrastructure or a large mine or a solar power project.
Can you talk to me about the partnership model that you needed to roll out and when you were at Ontario, and how it helped you not only be qualified for the position of CEO at the CIB, but also manage it?
Yes. So given that background, I joined Infrastructure Ontario in 2012, late in 2012. And I think the work we've done in Ontario to get more infrastructure built over the last decade has really this idea of hybrid models where you're bringing in, of course, private sector expertise, engineering firms, architecture firms, the construction firms, and private finance where it's helpful, while still keeping public ownership of the assets. That's the P3 model. And if you look at Ontario, all of the hospitals we built, all of the roads and highways we built, the courthouses that Infrastructure Ontario oversaw the construction of remain public assets, but they leverage the best of the private sector. And that's some of the same logic we're trying to apply at the CIB.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell me how many contracts, when you were in heading the Ontario practice, was awarded to Mackenzie?
To the best of my recollection, one.
One. Can you tell me the amount that this contract was worth it?
Again, I don't remember figures.
10 million, 5 million, 1 million?
Less than $1 million.
Less than $1 million. Great. So now let's focus on your role since 2020. So can you tell me in general, when you walked into this role, what did you inherit? Did you had inherited projects, or you had inherited just a strategy or a structure, and you had to execute them?
Well, as I mentioned in my opening comments, the CIB was launched late in 2017 with the appointment of a board, really 2018 that staff started to join. Early on, there was a really significant investment by the CIB in the REM transit project in Montreal, which was a great foundation. But following that, there was a period of about 18 months where I think the CIB was very focused on trying to build relationships with provinces, with municipalities, with private sector owners, was trying to figure out how exactly to get through the governance and the process.
Is this timeline normal? 18 months to be able to?
I think in many ways it's normal to stand up an organization from scratch. I think also we did learn some things along the way in answer to the question in terms of what it takes for us to be good partners with municipalities, with Indigenous communities, and with the private sector. And so when I joined in November of 2020, we had still just made the one investment in the REM. And if you listen to my opening comments today, we're at 43. They're approaching $9 billion of our money. And those are real investments.
Thank you. I got 15 seconds, and I just want to get to a couple of other points. The total amount of project that was allocated, the so-called four huge project to Mackenzie, can you tell me how much was it in total value?
$1.43 million.
Okay. Do you believe you uniquely qualify because of your relationship with the provinces to be able to head this position that you're holding?
I like to think that I bring something to the organization, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jouari. Mrs. Vinola for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much, Mr. Corey, for being here today. I'm trying to demystify the birth, the creation of the Infrastructure Bank. To create this bank was a recommendation from the Consultative Committee on Economic Development, whose composition was people from Mackenzie and BlackRock. BlackRock, which is an investment firm, infrastructure investment, and real estate. The government itself recognized that these companies related to the creation of the Infrastructure Bank could have benefited from decisions made on this recommendation to create the bank. Yourself did confirm that you were a former member and Mackenzie. Those who created the Infrastructure Bank are the same people who are in fact directing the bank, and former companies might gain contracts and money from the federal government. At least from appearances point of view, this would look like the use, perhaps, of insider information for activities which would be very profitable.
I would just reiterate perhaps the timeline. I left McKinsey more than a decade ago and have since worked in public service. I was hired in this job through a competitive search. I was contacted by a executive search firm, by a headhunter who was searching for a new CEO for the CIB. And they contacted me because of my background and expertise, primarily at Infrastructure Ontario. And I think the other thing I would say is the fact of the matter is, since I've become the CEO, we haven't hired McKinsey for $1 of work. And you mentioned BlackRock. BlackRock does not happen to be an investor in any of the projects we're working on either. So we are trying to get more infrastructure built in this country by bringing together the best of public and private sector, and that's what I came to the job to do.
Merci.
Thank you. Last week, Mr. Barton said to this committee that the Consultative Council was focused on economy and productivity and not on social factors. When infrastructures are financed by the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, if there are negative impact on the environment or on society, would you turn a blind eye to these impacts, or would you refuse just outright that investments be made in those infrastructure projects?
Excellent question. Thank you. The CIB, given that we're a Crown corporation, the critical thing to think about is we take the policy of government of the day and the priority sectors for investment. That comes from government. Clean power, green energy, broadband to homes, transit and transportation and trade. And for each of those, we set clear outcome goals. Tons of GHG emissions reduced, number of new transit riders. So those are the public policy goals. Our job is to invest the money to make those happen. So to be clear, we have a goal around building green infrastructure and reducing the carbon intensity of our economy. If a project came that was counter to that, yes, we would not invest in it. Correct.
Merci.
Thank you. You just recently said that the bank is based on a partnership approach, PEP, public and private partnership. Now, the government, or should I say the public, are guaranteeing the funding, and the profits go to the private sector.
In our projects, we're always working with some blend of public and private. So sometimes it's a municipality. So we've lent money to the city of Calgary or to the city of Brampton to buy new electric buses. That's us working directly with the municipality to share in the cost, the upfront cost of buying new electric buses, and sharing in the risk that those buses perform over the next decade the way we all expect them to. Other times, we're investing a district energy company who is building out their district energy system, and they're a private company, but they're providing a public good, which is shared district energy, which takes buildings off of gas. Then we'd lend money to them. And in those cases, we would always have a gain sharing mechanism so that we get a higher return if the business does well. So we're not only guaranteeing profits, it's a loan or an equity investment. These are true investments by us, and that includes making sure that if the project does well, if it's with the private sector, then we share in that.
Well, it's reassuring that the profits will be shared, because past projects were not quite that. The risk was social and the profit was private. So that's a good point to consider. Thank you.
End on that. That is your time. Mr. Johns is looking at you to start his 6 minutes. Sure. Mr. Johns, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I tabled a motion the other day, and I'm hoping we can have a chat about that and make a decision to expand this study to include Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, etc., KPMG, and Ernst & Young. And I don't think I need to read the motion again, do I? So I'm hoping that, we can either make a decision or have a conversation. Maybe I'd like to hear from other members of the committee and see where they're at.
I'm not sure.
Of course, I'm hoping that the committee will support the motion.
I'm not sure if we have a will to, because we're right into this one, if perhaps we'll let this one, Mr. Barrett?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Johns. Last name only this time, not first name, last name.
Get used to it.
Right. The merit of looking at why these consulting companies are receiving these massive sums of money instead of the work being done in-house by our public service. Certainly, we share the belief that closer examination is required, and not sometime into the distant future, but I would suggest, perhaps immediately following the conclusion of our look at McKinsey, the rationale as to why not to blend them, I think is, I touched on those points in my questions to the minister today. It speaks to a question of values. And you also went on further to talk about some of the conduct of some of those other contractors and whether they're appropriate vendors as well. So I think that that study is one worth doing, but would like to conclude the work that we're undertaking on McKinsey right now. So I'm not sure if that would be, if you'd be amenable to that, but that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
So maybe through, thank you. I shouldn't interrupt you. Sorry. It's not procedurally. Sorry about that.
Just to follow up on Mr. Barrett's comment, I would certainly move to adjourn debate on this and then reintroduce it at a more appropriate time. But I'll leave it up to you. And then Mr. Shawari, after you respond, Mr. Johns.
Well, I really do appreciate to hear that my other colleagues in the opposition are supportive of examining the other companies in the 100+ elite club of procurement, $100 million plus club. And I am happy to come back at the next meeting with a revised motion that could gain support of my colleagues, that would allow us to finish the McKinsey study and then look at the other 5 companies that are getting, $100 million plus in consulting fees from the government. If that makes sense for my colleagues here, I want to make it work. Obviously, I want to get to the bottom of the trough here and see what's going on here, and get an idea of what exactly is being done and make good recommendations to the minister so we can fix this.
And perhaps give the government time to actually Google some of these corporation names with the word corruption beside it.
Well, I'm sure we're going to be able to get to the bottom of a lot of things, certainly. Hopefully, in examining that. But I am open to coming back with a revision in terms of allowing McKinsey to stand alone.
Mr. Jouari?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I definitely agree with both colleagues. Not only we have to look at the number, the amount of dollars that we are spending in consulting fee, especially outsourcing, as well as the fact that let's keep the focus of this study on McKinsey and let's not dilute the study. So we also, when our colleague Mr. Johns is going to prepare the revision, I would like to suggest that you may want to consider actually look at the scope of the outsourcing that we are doing and include all the witnesses that we want from all those firms as witnesses to come in to the outsourcing, because we have the outsourcing. The scope is broad enough to be able to include all those firms coming. The policies around outsourcing give us an opportunity to be able to ask the fundamental question of why and what has driven the need for us to be able to increase by many folds during the 2021, 2022, as well as what drove those And I think the scope of the outsourcing, which is already one study in our books of number of studies, would be a great place for us to consider ensuring that it fits into that, and also adding the witnesses as outsourcing witnesses, and get it done, because that study is already approved. And I believe this is a study that will be concurrent running with the diversity, had we not been engaging on the McKinsey. And I'll stop. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Barrett?
Did Mr. Johns, but before, did you want to respond to that, Mr. Johns?
I'm happy to come back with a motion to expand looking at those companies, and certainly we'll consider the feedback from my colleagues here. Everybody knows that I'm very much in support of the outsourcing study, and certainly would like to see it expanded and spend more time on that study. Initially, I was very concerned about the amount of meetings we were going to have around that, so I'm glad to see the enthusiasm here today to seek the idea of having many more meetings to look at this more in depth, given the circumstances.
Barrett?
Sure. Chair, I'd moved that we adjourn debate on Mr. John's motion because he's indicated he'd like to come back with
Thank
it.
you. So, motion to move to adjourn the debate on this motion. Any disagreements? Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for agreeing. Mr. Johns, can we consider that was your 6-minute intervention?
Sure.
Wonderful. Thanks. Mrs. Lewis, because of that, we're very short of time. We're going to go 2.5 minute, and that will finish the day.
Thank you. Mr. Corey, are you aware that last May that the Standing Committee on Transportation, Infrastructure and Communities recommended that the Government of Canada abolish the Infrastructure Bank? Are you aware of that?
I am.
Okay. And despite paying McKinsey $1.43 million in consulting fees, the Infrastructure Bank has not even completed one single project. Now, clearly, McKinsey did not do a good job, and Canadians did not get their money's worth of the $1.43 million. Would you agree with that?
I would not. I think I would say we've made significant progress in the 2 years since I've joined the CIB. The testimony for the Trans Committee happened in March of 2021, just after I joined, and nearly 2 years ago. And since that time, we have made real progress in getting infrastructure built in this country.
Mr. Corey, has one project reached financial close?
Yes.
Okay, and you've completed. Which project has the Infrastructure Bank completed, Mr. Corey?
To answer your question, 27 projects have reached financial close. That means there's a credit agreement and we're lending them money. 19 of those are in active construction, so there's shovels in the ground, concrete being laid. There are new buses on the road in Edmonton. Those have been purchased and are running. There's irrigation piping being laid in Alberta. There's new fiber optic cable being laid in
Right, but those you funded, but there's no project that has been completed that you can say that you have completely finished and that has been completely finished and successful. Isn't that correct, Mr. Corey? There's not one project.
Infrastructure projects, by their definition, take time to engineer, design, and build. And I think the typical timeline one would see for a large infrastructure project is in the range of 4 to 5 years. The CIB has only existed for 5. The REM project, which is our first investment, trains will be running later in the year. As I say, many other projects are deep into construction, but as I mentioned in our stats, of the 43 projects we've done, 42 of them are in the last 2 years. So it is absolutely fair to say the construction is still underway on those projects.
Do you know how many former McKinsey clients got money from the Infrastructure Bank?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
How many former McKinsey clients got funding from the Infrastructure Bank?
I don't know. I don't know the full list of McKinsey clients, but we've lent money to, as I say, governments of all levels and private sector companies.
Are you aware of former McKinsey clients that got money from the Infrastructure Bank?
Brief answer, please.
I'm sorry?
I said not to my knowledge, no.
That is our time.
I don't have enough visibility to who their clients are to answer the question with.
Thanks. I'm afraid our time's up. Mr. Corey, we'll go to Mrs. Thompson for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Just very quickly, Mr. Corey, could you speak to the average timeline for an infrastructure project? So from the moment that it touches your desk or
Yes.
within your department to completion, what's the timeline?
Thanks for the question. So typically, an infrastructure project has a timeline of somewhere in the range of 5 years. There is usually, and that's going quite quickly. They also last, I should say, for 50 to 100 years. So these are long-term investments we're making in our country. But an infrastructure project generally has a year to 18 months of design and engineering work to actually figure out the project. Then it's got often 12 to 24 months of procurement to hire a short list of construction firms to build it, and then somewhere in 3 or 4 years usually to build. So typically you would expect to see that timeline for a large scale infrastructure project. Some of our projects are smaller. We're working with Indigenous communities on renewable projects, on a wastewater treatment plant. Those projects might be more like 24 months. They're quicker. And the good news is some of the projects we're getting involved in fact, the reason we're getting involved is because there's been years of work leading up to this point. They've done the detailed engineering and they're stuck and they're looking for help. So those ones can go a bit faster, but that's the general timeline we're talking about.
Sorry, I didn't want to come on here. Thank you. Could you also speak briefly, because I know I'm running out of time quickly, how the Infrastructure Bank protects against conflict of interest, so what those processes look like?
Absolutely. So we have a conflict of interest policy. It's quite rigorous. Every investment we make, both board members, we have an independent board of directors who bring expertise from the private sector from across the country. So they declare any conflicts, and our employees are held to a very strict code of conduct. We are, of course, lending money to the infrastructure owners, the city of Mississauga, the province of Alberta, or the renewable power developer. And so we're not directly building or contracting for the infrastructure. We're lending them money. We're very careful to document any potential real or perceived conflict of interest, and we keep a rigorous record of those.
Thank you. And then if you could again, because of time, speak to the contribution, if any, that McKinsey made in the formation of the Institute, or indeed was that part of the Liberal 2015 platform?
In about a 5-second answer, please.
My understanding is the early work helped set up the investment framework and the risk management practices of the CIB for the first few years, and I think that was helpful. Of course, 5 years in, we've evolved from those quite a bit, and in my time, we have revised those.
Right. Mrs. Thompson, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Colleagues, I apologize. One last point of business. The Governor General studies, the way we had done the motions, we actually ended up with 2 separate studies. With committee's approval to help the analysts, we'll roll that in, combine the 2 studies, and then all the testimony we heard will become part of the one study. So the first one, the expenditures related to the Office of GG Secretary and Travel, will become part of the travel expenditure study. So if we all agree, we'll make our lives of our analysts easier. Thank you very much. Unless anyone has anything else, we will be adjourned. Mr. Corey, thank you very much.
Thank you.